Welcome back to the second instalment of the Hundred Years' War series. Where were we? The Treaty of Bretigny, the first peace between France and England, has been signed, and the English have expanded their domains in southern France. The English also await a hefty ransom from the French after having captured their King John. But the situation quickly changes when John dies in 1364, while still in captivity in London. And on the 19th of May 1364, Charles V, John's son, is crowned King of France. But still, there was no resumption of the Hundred Years' War. The event that caused this stemmed from another proxy war between France and England. The Castilian War of Succession began in 1366 between Peter of Castile and Henry de Trastamara. Charles V of France gave Henry the support of 12,000 soldiers to take back the throne of Castile. Peter then appealed to the English, but no support was given yet. This means that Henry could take control of Castile, and Peter was forced to flee into exile. The reason for the lack of English support was the worry that intervening would violate the Treaty of Bretigny, but a workaround was found where the Black Prince, the son of Edward III of England, would assist Peter as a representative of the Duchy of Aquitaine rather than the English crown itself. The Black Prince then led an army into Spain and defeated the forces of Henry at the Battle of Nayura and restored Peter to power. At this point, the Castilians under Peter were actually meant to financially support the Black Prince and the Duchy of Aquitaine, but no monetary compensation arrived. Ill health then forced the Black Prince to return to Aquitaine, where he instituted a half tax, which is basically an early form of property tax, to try to pay off the debts that he incurred through helping Peter win the war. The new tax caused uproar in Aquitaine. A lot of the local nobility were already outraged at the number of imported English administrators in the area, and grew even more incensed at the implementation of the new tax. A group of Gascon nobles gathered and travelled to Paris to petition Charles V of France to fix this slight. Charles summoned the Black Prince to Paris to adjudicate, at which point the Black Prince answered, like a badass, that he would travel to Paris with around 60,000 men behind him. And thus the next phase of the Hundred Years' War began. Charles V declared all English possessions in France forfeit, and Edward III of England declared himself the rightful King of France. With English presence in Castile gone, Henry de Trastamara had been able to reconquer Castile, and was now able to provide naval support to the French. This culminated in the naval battle of La Rochelle in 1372. A detachment of English nobles and retinues departed from mainland England in a small number of around 15 ships to travel to Aquitaine and raise an army to reconquer most of the duchy. The ships had on them £12,000 to recruit this new army. But the naval battle of La Rochelle was lost by the English, who were intercepted outside the town. Guess what it's called? La Rochelle. There were thousands of deaths, injuries, and soldiers captured for the English, and the £12,000 was lost to the Castilians, and for the time period, this was a very hefty sum of money, like enough money to raise and pay for an army over a few months, I would guess. The English were left reeling by this defeat and had to come up with a plan to solve their financial problems. This came in the form of the next raid that was organised for 1373. John of Gaunt, the fourth son of Edward III, was sent to France, and from Calais would engage in a large raid through France, which would end up in friendly territory in Gascony. But this was an ambitious task and had a high risk of failure. John of Gaunt and the Duke of Brittany, John of Montfort, led 9,000 men from Calais and raided southward. Charles V ordered the French forces to shadow the raiding party, but never to engage in open battle. He obviously learned his lessons from his predecessors and from the battles like Poitiers and Crécy. The English found themselves outmaneuvered and stuck by the river Allier by French forces. To escape, they forced a hard crossing over the river, but had to abandon their baggage and loot. When they arrived in Gascony, many men and all belongings had been lost, and over half of the 30,000 horses the initial expedition set out with had either died or disappeared. This was quite a remarkable feat, but still a military failure. Things only got worse for the English. The once feared military commander, Edward, the Black Prince, son of Edward III, was dead, and this left the succession to the Black Prince's second son, Richard, who became the new heir apparent to the English throne, because the first son of the Black Prince had already died. Then, to make things worse, Edward III of England died in 1377, at which point the 10-year-old Richard II became the English king. The political instability in England diverted the attention away from France for now, where the French had reconquered most of the holdings that were held by the English kings. A small army had reconquered most of Gascony and Aquitaine, aside from a couple of ports for the French, and Calais did still remain in English hands. The French then turned their attention to the English ally, the Duchy of Brittany, who they now invaded. Under the Earl of Buckingham, an English support force was sent in 1380, which advanced to the French town of Nantes and laid siege to the city. But a big blow was dealt to the English when the Bretons pulled out of the war on the English side, and Brittany paid 50,000 francs to the Earl of Buckingham to make him abandon the siege and leave. So, the English weren't in a great position. But in 1380, the French King Charles V died, and left his 11-year-old son Charles VI as the new king. Philip II of Burgundy, who was also the uncle of the new French king, assembled a fleet of 1,200 ships at the town of Sluis in 1386 to attempt a new invasion of England, but delayed arrivals from his allies and bad weather meant that this ambition never bore any fruit. England was on the brink of financial collapse and was plagued by internal divisions. John of Gaunt returned after pressing a claim to the throne of Castile and abolished the power of the new Regency Council that currently ruled in King Richard's name. After John of Gaunt died, Richard II disinherited John of Gaunt's son, Henry Bolingbroke, who after some years in exile returned to depose Richard II and rule as the new English king Henry IV. On the other side of the Channel, in France, in 1392, Charles VI also descended into madness, and a regency was declared, which in the future would cause tension, which would be exploited by the English. But for now, the French were in the better position, and had reconquered most of France, bar some ports in Gascony, and of course, Calais. There's going to be 2 more episodes in this series, so don't forget to subscribe to keep up with them, and please do leave a like, it really does help these videos reach more people. And I will see you next time.